Ryan, so it is official. The House is voting to hold one of its members in criminal contempt. Give us the latest on this.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Don. And this played out just as we predicted at the beginning of your program at 10 o'clock. The House has voted to report out a criminal contempt referral of Congress for the former White House chief of staff and a former member of Congress, Mark Meadows. The final vote ended up being 222 to 208. There were only two Republicans that voted yes, Liz Cheney of Wyoming and Adam Kinzinger of Illinois. They,
As
of course,
predicted, right?
Yep, they're the only two Republicans that also sit on the January 6th Select Committee. So every single other Republican voted no against allowing the Congress to enforce its subpoena laws, which gives the Congress the authority to call someone before them to answer questions if it's a matter that they believe has a legislative purpose. And the committee believes that their work in investigating January 6th is a key legislative purpose that will ultimately result in changes to the way Congress does business. And then, to that end, what other information they find out about the attacks that happened on January 6th. So this isn't a surprise. Don, of course, the big question is, how long will it take the Department of Justice to deliberate whether or not they will prosecute this case? What we saw play out here today is essentially a recommendation. They write up a report. They give all the evidence and information that they have to say that they believe that an individual has, ignored the rules of Congress and not answered a subpoena correctly. It's up to prosecutors in the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office to determine whether or not that's a prosecutable offense. They thought that about Steve Bannon. And the situation's a little bit different with Mark Meadows because he was working in the executive branch at the time in question. But the committee believes that there's enough evidence there that the Department of Justice should move forward and prosecute this case. It'll then go to trial. And Mark Meadows could face jail time, depending on how this all plays out, Don.
I'm just looking, Ryan, the 7 Republicans who voted, this one was strictly along party lines, except for, as predicted, Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger. But there were 7 Republicans who voted for contempt, the contempt resolution on Steve Bannon. They didn't do it this time. What's the reasoning here? What's going on?
I think that there have been a lot of Republicans who you have seen, I shouldn't say a lot, there's a handful of Republicans that we've seen from time to time that have crossed party lines for these issues related to January 6th, either to vote in favor of the impeachment of the former President Donald Trump, who have voted to form that independent commission that would allow for an independent group to investigate January 6th. But as we've seen this process go along, you've seen fewer and fewer Republicans willing to take that step of kind of sticking their necks out against the party's base to take these tough votes as it relates to anything having to do with Donald Trump is essentially what it comes down to. There are some Republicans, you think of John Katko, for instance, who voted to impeach Donald Trump twice, who was one of the architects of the independent commission, but has been very critical of this select committee, who believes it's too partisan. Each and every Republican that chooses to vote no, they have their own reasons for it. Some say it's too partisan. Some say they don't believe the subpoena power is correct and is using correct. I think of Nancy Mace of South Carolina, for instance. Right. She was one of those Republicans who voted in favor of the Bannon contempt referral. And she said it was expressly because she was concerned about Congress maintaining that subpoena authority. She chose not to do that tonight. We don't know the exact reason why. But, a lot of these Republicans in this Trump era have found themselves in very difficult positions, especially if they hope to seek re-election and have to go through a very tough primary where somebody like Donald Trump could just go pick somebody out of the blue and say that he endorses that candidate and has them run against them.
Representative Jamie Herrera Butler voted for, these are the folks who voted for the Bannon contempt. Jamie Herrera Butler, Brian Fitzpatrick, Nancy Mace, as you mentioned, Fred Upton, Peter Mayer, John Katko, as you mentioned, Anthony Gonzalez of Ohio, but they didn't vote for this Meadows resolution. Ryan Nobles following the breaking news up for us up on Capitol Hill. We'll get back to Ryan if we need to get more information. Ryan, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Chris Whipple is here. I want to bring him in. He is the author of The Gatekeepers, How the White House Chief of Staff Defined Every Presidency. Thank you, sir. So we just got that breaking news.
Yeah.
Good evening to you. Mark Meadows becoming the first White House Chief of Staff to face criminal contempt charges. Since Watergate, we should say. He started out cooperating. What happened? How did it come to this?
Well, it's really an historic moment. I mean, first time in almost 200 years. And but it's a day of reckoning that Mark Meadows richly deserves. I mean, there used to be a stiff competition, Don, for the worst chief of staff in history. No longer. Meadows owns that title by a country mile. And it's almost as if, not content with having the title of worst chief, he wants to demonstrate that he's the dumbest chief. And let's just count the ways. I mean, number one, he's relying on this specious argument of privilege, which has to yield to evidence of a criminal conspiracy and an attempt to overthrow the government, as Liz Cheney has pointed out. Number two, he is, by the way, has already delivered thousands of pages of documents and emails to the committee while claiming the same privilege.
And has written a book.
And, oh, by the way, has just released a book. So you really have to wonder how he could have handled this any more ineptly than he has. And so here he is. And watching that, you really have to wonder how someone who was once a member of that body could throw away not only his reputation, but maybe even his freedom ultimately in the service of somebody like Donald Trump.
But one must ask, if you said all of those things, right? What kind of strategy is this? Is this a strategy? Is he trying to have it both ways? Like, yeah, I'm cooperating, so therefore you shouldn't hold me in contempt. I should not face any consequences for this. But also, hey, Trump and Trump supporters, look, I'm saying I'm defying. What kind of strategy?
Oh, well, look, if there's a strategy here, it's, Winston Churchill would say it's exceedingly well disguised. I mean, I don't see any strategy here other than possibly Bannon panicking when he discovered that Trump wasn't as excited about his book as he was. I think he simply went into retreat. So I don't think he has a strategy that can possibly work here. And as I say, I think that he'll wind up probably being prosecuted by DOJ.
You think he will?
I think the odds are that he will, because again, I don't think the privilege that he's citing here can possibly work when the Supreme Court decided this back in 1974 by a vote of 8-0, that privilege has to yield when there's evidence of a possible crime.
Mark Meadows is, was he the fourth? He was the former president's fourth chief of staff.
That's right.
But he is said to be the chief of staff
right.
that Trump always wanted. Why is that?
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, he took sycophancy and he made it an art form. Dwight Eisenhower had a chief of staff named Sherman Adams who was gruff and tough, a great gatekeeper, and they called him the abominable no man. Well, in my mind, Mark Meadows is the abominable yes man. There was never a cockamamie scheme or even illegal proposal that Meadows wasn't happy to take to the commander-in-chief or even become complicit in, as we've now discovered as the evidence continues to come out. I mean, rather than being the gatekeeper, he was the guy who flung the gate open to this Star Wars bar cast of conspiracy theorists and crackpots like Sidney Powell and the others. And of course, now we're discovering that he's up to his neck in the plot to destroy democracy.